Vanakkam, Namaste, and blessings to everyone. This is Dr. Bhairavi Balasubramanian, PhD, the Sky Priestess. Today, I'd like to talk to you about not just the astrology of what's coming up over the next week, and I'm going to leave you to read the articles for the specific details. I want to use the video for things that we really just need to talk to, person to person. I also want to talk to you about the energy that's happening now. So, things that are really getting the interest of many magical and spiritual communities all around the world is the fact that the ceiling of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris has caught fire, and I've been looking at the pictures. It's not a small thing. And at the same time, I also read that a mosque, the third most holiest site in Islam, also caught fire in Jerusalem. And when you look at everything else that's happening, I see many people jumping to certain conclusions, looking at both of these events happening at the same time. And what I want to say is, looking at this and looking at the kinds of reactions that I've seen coming through this, is hold your horses. Things are not what they appear. Things are not, so easily put into a one-dimensional meme to say, oh my God, it's the rise of the divine feminine. Notre Dame has caught fire. And when I see this, I actually get quite pissed off. Some of you who are new to my stuff might not know this about me. Some of you probably already do, but I started out studying political science. My work was to actually decode ritual and symbol, and especially in the context of political institutions. And religious institutions actually inform the context of the political. If you look at the development of the nation state, it's very much wedded with the development of the church, especially in Western Europe. So when I look at something like this, I see, okay, that's one line of interpretation. The fire obviously means that the fire of the divine feminine is coming through, and so that had to be burnt down and we should celebrate this. That's one line of interpretation. Another line of interpretation basically says, but hang on, do we not also see the videos of Parisians standing outside the cathedral and weeping and singing Ave Maria? And who is Maria? Is she not a manifestation of the feminine? Or are you really going to tell me that every single emanation of Mother Mary is co-opted by the patriarchy? I don't think so. So, these are sites and events and moments in collective consciousness that should not be reduced to one thing. These are things that actually ask us to engage from a much more nuanced, from a much more sophisticated, from a much deeper heart-centered response, which I know everyone watching this video is capable of. Now, I gotta say, I was really bloody pissed off because I don't like referencing people in my videos. I think what private individuals do is their business. But someone sent me a post, and she had an image of the goddess Kali on it. And it was all about how it was burning, this meant that patriarchy was getting hit and everything. And I'm thinking to myself, you really sent this to the wrong person. Because I've also been seeing other narratives about Notre Dame, what it used to be in ancient times, the ancient history of the site before the church was built, and of course the injustices that were done to women, in the time of when women were being persecuted for being magical or being understood as being different somehow. There are different layers of the history, and all of that gets affected by a fire. Some may see it as a purification, some may see it as a rebirthing, and some can see it as a punishment. And what I'm saying is, don't narrow it down to look like the interpretation you want to see it as. Because there are just so many different ways you can see it. I mean, you can do that, but you also give power to a narrative that you don't really need to give power to. And the reason I'm saying this is because, one, I went to Notre Dame. It was probably the only place I actually did like in Paris. I did like the second floor of the Eiffel Tower, as in the one that's closer to the base. But when I went to Notre Dame, I prayed. I prayed sincerely, and I said, please, bring back the feminine in a way that is, I think the words I used were in a way that is heartfelt, in a way that encompasses all. Bring her back. That was my prayer at Notre Dame. Would I have prayed that way because I was in a place that was all about the patriarchy and all about that, unjust history? Sure, that's a layer of it. But there's also a deeper layer of the land itself. Nobody builds a church like that or a cathedral like that unless there's power in the land first. I was probably speaking to something a lot deeper than I realized at the time, and this was a couple of years ago. And when I think about that land, I feel that this is a signal of rebirthing, much like the phoenix rises from the ashes, rather than something exclusively being crumbling down. It's also a sign that something new is being reborn, and people will recover. The cathedral has suffered damage, time and time again, and it's been changed time and time again. So let's not fixate on this very destructive narratives and agendas. That's part of the whole Arisian thing. And I've already told you in several videos, Aries is not necessarily about justice. This is revenge in the name of justice. But in that's a very subtle and powerful distinction to make. Now, when I saw this icon in my inbox, especially with the goddess Kali on it, I'm really thinking to myself, I just held my son. I just held my tongue because I was just like, don't say anything, don't say anything, don't say anything. Probably best not to stir the boat, rock the boat right now. Just stay put, watch what happens. But then I've sat with it for a few hours and I said, you know what, I really need to talk about this. Now, the name Bhairavi is actually a Mahavidya form of Kali. And I would say it is probably the most terrifying form of Kali. This is the nuclear energy of the goddess. This is the aspect of goddess that deals with the decay and destruction. My mother did not know this when she named me. I did not take the name Bhairavi. I was given it at birth. And so I am someone who, let us just say, does not look at decay and destruction as a bad thing. I look at it as part of the natural cycle of life. But maybe because of my name, I've had to learn that lesson quite quickly. And I've had to look at that chaos and that process of loss and that process of transformation that comes through this destructive energy. And I've had to realize that it fundamentally comes from a movement of love. Death and destruction and decay is the balance to life and growth. If there is no destruction, if there is no conversion of energy into a different form or state, life cannot be. We would saturate. And when the goddess actually chooses to act in this way, it is not out of rage. It is not out of hatred. It is out of deep compassion. And working with the energy of the goddess Kali in her actual form is about learning that compassion. So much so that this doesn't become an ego thing. I don't normally talk about this, because this has been very much my personal journey and path. And I've looked at this and I've just gone, this is really not the way people are talking about her, especially in the West, where she becomes a poster girl for, I'm angry. That's really not what she's about, honey. She comes into that form. She has many different forms. Some forms are they're very beautiful. They are very abundant. Some forms are very much about that sensual feminine. Some forms are very destructive, but they are not vengeful. There's a difference here in the understanding of her. She doesn't just come into anger because that's her first, part of call. There is a stage. She looks at different angles. She looks at different ways of the situation. And when she needs to strike, she does. But it's usually for a much more powerful cause. So there's a lot to unpack in that mythology. And unfortunately, like I said, especially in Western reinterpretations of Kali, she tends to be used as this poster girl for, yes, I'm going to burn it down. It's all about vengeance. No, like I said, I don't normally talk about this because I do try to leave things open to people to interpret as they want to. If the goddess wants to show them a different way, that's up to her and them. But like I said, it just came my way today and I just went, nah, I gotta say something. So, bottom line, shit's happening in the world. And the Notre Dame example and the way we're responding to it is a really good example of, or it's a test of how and whether we can actually look at the changes that are happening through the lens of compassion or through the lens of our ego. And when we work and when we understand the energy of the divine feminine, we also have to come to a point where we actually let go of the narratives surrounding her, because that is another problem that I had with the narratives, because it's always the divine feminine has been suppressed. That I pretend that as well. I know I used to run different pages, I used to write that as well, and then one day I realized, hang on, that's not true. The divine feminine has been hidden. You can't hide the divine feminine. It's divine. You can't do anything to it. You can't hurt it. It's always been there in the pure form. You can be disconnected from it, but you can't actually hurt the energy itself. What gets hurt is humanity's experience with it. But that frequency of divine feminine consciousness has always been there. She has never gone away. This is a time where we are reawakening to her embrace. And part of that, yes, is going to bring old structures down. But what I would say is to make this embrace one of love, one of alignment for all of humanity. See what is happening with compassion, not with judgment. That's really difficult to do for a lot of people. But that's what we're being asked to do. That's how we're being asked to step into greater love. Bringing it back to the astrology, over the next week, I would say try to avoid making any major decisions. Look at how you're responding to the world around you. Look at how you're responding to different triggers. Look at what you're being asked to express back to the world before you decide one thing or another thing. We got Mercury entering Aries, we got Venus entering Aries, we got the Sun entering Taurus, we got Juno entering Cancer, we got Mercury just before that conjuncting Chiron. We've got a lot of stuff coming up over the next week. And again, look at the article for the actual astro info, but this is the energy behind it. Yes, the divine feminine is returning, but again, she was always there. Our awareness and ability to embrace her collectively is returning. And we need to do that from here. It's all about that heart-centered consciousness. Show compassion for what is happening in the world around us. Whilst there can be a certain sense of vindication, understandably. And for whatever reason in my life, I've probably been drawn more so to the Judeo-Christian tradition than my own, though I have explored both in parallel and others. I can understand where a lot of this rage is coming from, but that is what we need to let go of. When we can understand these flames as flames of deep compassion, we not only transmute our relationship to it, but we help the people who had a positive association or connotation with that site to also transform their relationship to it. And also as a political scientist, I gotta say, the fact that this site is getting a lot more coverage than the third holiest site in Islam that is burning in Jerusalem also says something about our cognitive biases and which sites we see as more significant than others. And I've also been seeing some memes on Facebook flying around saying, well, it would be really nice if people were to kick up this much of a fuss when indigenous sacred territories get burnt down or get, bulldozed or get stolen by legalities, so to speak. And that is also something to take home. There's a lot of rage that is being stirred up because of this event. And I'm saying transmute it. You want to talk about the divine feminine? Talk about her love. Her fires are not here to burn you down. They are here to awaken your heart. Let's see how all of us emerge from that together. Take care. Many blessings. Ciao, ciao for now.